Hi everyone, Teddy Baldassarre here, back again. We're gonna be doing another Q&A here where I asked you all to ask me some questions on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and elsewhere on social media, and I'm gonna be answering them here today. If you wanna stay in the loop and actually ask questions in the future for some of our Q&As, I make sure to follow on Twitter, Instagram, also follow along on Facebook because that's where I'm going to pose those questions in the future. And before we jump in, I need your help. We have an upcoming video where you will decide on the best watch for under $1,000 voted on by our community here. So down below is a simple anonymous form where you can pick up to 10 of the best watches under 1,000. We have around 30 on that list. We have to narrow this down to a much smaller number. Please cast your vote for your personal top 10. Doesn't matter what you think other people think, it's what you think. Once we determine the finalists, we will then create a bracket style tournament where you can vote on my Instagram to see who wins on these head-to-head matchups until we get down to one final winner. Be sure to be following us on Instagram so you can take part in the tournament when it happens. And then down below, please submit your votes now. A link will be in the description down below. Thank you very much in advance for your help. Our first question comes from Facebook, and this question asks, between Seiko and Orient, which one do you think truly dominates in the range under $500? Now, it is important to establish that Orient is a Seiko Epson Corporation brand, so it falls underneath the broader umbrella of Seiko. Even I am not entirely certain on where it sits in the hierarchy of things and how it's managed completely. It is a little bit confusing and murky for Orient. It's just kind of out there on an island, and Seiko Epson basically just took control of it and now is just operating as it was for years. But that is important context, I think, to bring up as we're looking at answering this question. I do still think that Seiko is the king in terms of under $500. I mean, Seiko is also multifaceted in its price points and which it's going after, but under $500 has it's just been established that that was really where they dominated. That considered, I do think Orient is doing a phenomenal job, and if you're talking about, in some areas, they do maybe a better job. I think the reason why you have to still give the nod to Seiko is just they're an institution in watchmaking. I would say the most famous brand outside of Switzerland in watchmaking, and they have many icons under $500 even. Samurais, Turtles, Seiko 5s, so many JDM models. Now, Orient's not to be glossed over either. I mean, they've done a nice job, but let's be clear, it is a small blip compared to a large conglomerate that is Seiko. Outside of the internet watch community, most people have no idea what an Orient watch is. Actually, I know nobody has any idea what an Orient watch is. This is just a collector enthusiast brand that people know of. They don't have as widespread distribution. You're not gonna be able to go try on an Orient watch in your local mall anytime soon. But where I think you can say Orient is doing a phenomenal job is they're starting to get some great lines available, like the Bambino, of course, has been long established. The Rei, Mako, Komatsu, Kano, and the QC is a bit more solid when you're talking about, say, under $300 compared to some Seiko models. Movements are also going to have a tighter range of deviation than some out-of-the-shelf 4R series of calibers. So Orient certainly does some things well, and I would say for enthusiasts, absolutely makes sense why some people might look in the direction of Orient instead of Seiko. But if you're talking about king status, come on, we have to say Seiko still has that title. Next question comes from Instagram, and this one asks, though they aren't for everyone and aren't really accessible to most due to their price, I'm curious what your opinion is of Jacob & Co.'s current watch offerings. Aside from all the bling, they do seem to have developed some really interesting complications over the last decade you will not see elsewhere. So I had the opportunity to actually handle a lot of Jacob's pieces and actually sat down with Jacob and saw many Jacob & Co. watches that I ever thought I would see in one sitting. It was pretty crazy to just see him pull things out of a box and just hand them to me. It was craziness in terms of their watches. Now, I have a more conservative taste in watches. So what Jacob & Co. is doing with their more brazen pieces, daring pieces, are not really my cup of tea. But make no mistake about it, the engineering on display there is absolutely freaking nuts. And it needs to be commended. I mean, you could argue some of the most creativity and most out-of-the-box type of executions and thinking is coming from Jacob & Co., of all watchmakers. So you have to give them kudos for some of the things that they're doing, even if some of the styles and branding is not necessarily just for me. For example, their Bugatti watch, I couldn't wear it for a variety of reasons, both its case size, its price, it's out there. but it has a mini combustion engine on the inside. And when I was looking at this thing and had like those pistons that were firing on inside this watch, I was like, why does anybody need this? But also I can't really look away. It's absurd to look at. Like, I'll show some close-up shots of this. It's pretty incredible. You have to give them its kudos. Also, the Astronomia, there's not one watch, and that was a watch where I always thought it as like, hey, that's a fishbowl on your wrist. But then once you start to see that watch in person, you're like, wait, it actually does kind of wear like a watch. So it's not as absurd as it might look in pictures, but there's no watch that I have seen that gets more people that are not watch people talking than the Astronomia. The Astronomia, when I think Conor McGregor had one on his wrist, I received so many texts from people that knew nothing about watches, but just knew that I liked watches, that sent me just like pictures of it saying like, hey, have you seen this watch before? It fascinates people. It almost creates this childlike curiosity and interest that, to me, that's partially what watches are about. It's creating curiosity, interest, it's expression, and that watch does it. And despite them not personally being for me, I mean, I did gain a little bit more of an appreciation for their watchmaking because, as you mentioned in your question, the engineering and what they're bringing to the table, nobody else is doing it. Our next question comes in from Instagram. I went to a Tudor boutique to try on the Black Bay 54, and the associate told me it was too small for my 7¼ inch wrist and suggested the Black Bay 58 was the better fit. I love the Black Bay 54, but the guy psyched me out about what's the right size for my wrist. Does the notion of size and what's too small still exist? Should I listen to him and move on to the Black Bay 58? So I'm going to give the Tudor associate the benefit of the doubt and thinking that they're just giving you a good suggestion. I think you are at a case size there where it is a smaller watch and you have more of a medium to slightly above average wrist size. So I could see why the 58 might be a better option, which is already a pretty condensed size watch and more mid 20th century in its approach and not being too large. But this is what I will just say is an all-encapsulating idea. Nobody can really ultimately tell you what is the right size for you. I set parameters for myself. I have videos on the subject, watch size, wrist size, what to think about, what are some considerations, but ultimately it's really all up to subjective opinion. I wear watches that I know for a fact some people are going to say they're too big for me, but that is not for them to determine. It's not up to somebody else to tell me that's too big for you, that's too small for you. You can pull off what you want to pull off, and if you like it, that's all that matters. I'm wearing a watch right now, Omega Globemaster. I hear people leave comments sometimes saying it's too big for you. I don't care what those people think. I like wearing the watch. I enjoy what it looks like on my wrist. I have watches from 34 millimeters up to like 44 millimeters in my collection. So I am all over the map. I don't really have allegiance to one case size. I was always like more into smaller case sizes, but I've just opened up way more to what is available to me. I will say though, sometimes it is easier to take a watch on a larger wrist and size it down than it is vice versa, where the watch might be too big for your wrist. Sometimes that might, maybe be more cumbersome to wear as it is large and it might weigh more than what you're comfortable with. That considered, watches are an element of self-expression and only you can determine what is the right size for you. So with that, I say go get the Black Bay 54. Next question comes from Barrett on Twitter. Question asks, do you think Rolex will bring back the Milgauss? 2023 Watches and Wonders, one of the big talks of the town for Rolex was that we were actually not getting something, we were losing something, and that was the Rolex Milgauss. That was one of the models from Rolex that they had not touched in a while. It was definitely needing an update. So it'll be interesting to see what they do. Now, there is a precedent where Rolex will go and walk away from this collection, and would they ever walk away from this collection for good? I don't think it's impossible. I don't think that that is going to happen. I think the Milgauss will come back. Where a lot of people are looking at is 2026. That'll be the 70-year anniversary since the original release of the line. So that, to me, that makes a lot of sense to bring it back. But there is something about the Milgauss. It's like this combination of showing two sides of the Rolex ethos. It has the serious side, which, the whole history around, resistance to magnetism, all of that, down and dirty to, being a real engineer's watch. Then on the other side, it's playful in its approach. And before, now we've seen, Rolex adopt this more playful attitude, but for a long time, this was a buttoned up brand, all serious, no play ever. So the Milgauss was that representation of maybe taking themselves not so seriously at times. The lightning hand, the different dial colors that were more eccentric, the playful touches of color throughout, including the crystal. This was not the conventional Rolex watch. And that to me was always part of the appeal with the Rolex Milgauss. It's one of these underrated pieces and it has many fans that I think would love to see it come back. And I'm included in that. I do think it will come back eventually. I am just guessing like you are, but 2026, that would make some sense. Next question comes from Instagram. I don't know how this question got 164 likes. Do you ever wear anything other than a suit? Do you sleep in a suit? If you're not wearing a suit, unlikely, what watch are you wearing? I mean, I know this is slightly, joking when he asked this, but do I really seem like I wear a suit all the time? I mean, because when I am out and about, not, working or being in front of the camera, I am typically not wearing a suit, like never, usually. Unless I'm going to like a formal dinner, I'm on camera, I am shooting a video. Most cases, I am wearing something that's a lot more casual. My go-to attire in the winter is, sweaters, turtlenecks, things of that sort. And then in the summer months, I am wearing, either like heavy bag t-shirts, but mostly I'm wearing like linen, button-down type of shirts, or Oxford cloth button-down shirts. Like that's kind of my go-to for my own attire. For footwear, I mean loafers in the summer, sometimes boots even, because I really like Goodyear welted boots. But I am way more of a casual guy in terms of my general attire when I am just out and about. I definitely go on both sides. And when it comes to a watch that I wear, most of my watches are applicable in both angles. I think you could wear most of my watches with a suit, but you can also wear them, dressed down. A lot of them are more versatile. I mean, that's kind of just my philosophy in life. Everything that I decide to acquire, I'm very cerebral about it, where I look at how much use am I going to get out of it? Can I actually apply this to my lifestyle? Does it work? So everything is developed around that central idea. So that is kind of how I look at everything, whether it's the clothes I wear, watches I wear, anything that I decide to include in my life, it's all really thinking about that and, is it viable? Because that allows me to enjoy it. If I can't wear the things or, find time for those things in my life, then I can't truly enjoy them. Next question from Instagram. With entry-level prices slowly ascending, do you think brands like Seiko, where the new Seiko 5s are now averaging around $300, will come out with models to fill the lowest price point? Short answer, no. Seiko is probably not going to do that. And one thing I do want to establish is in the past, yes, Seiko watches, everything has just gone up in price quite a bit. I mean, have you looked at egg costs lately? I mean, I eat eggs all the time, and I mean, those have gone up in price. So I mean, we're just in that world nowadays. But to address also where people are looking back with these rose-colored glasses for some Seiko models, part of it too, though, is the distribution of some of these brands has been very much cleaned up. Japanese brands especially, what was happening for many years and why you were able to find Seiko 5s is they were never intended to be in some of those markets that they were in. What you were seeing there is more sloppy overproduction, sloppy distribution, and transshipping to other markets where currency exchanges were creating opportunities where people could make some money by even listing them very low. This was like the perfect storm where you had all these brands that were set up for brick and mortar distribution, didn't know where their watches were going, had all these different markets that they were serving, currency exchanges, and the internet opens up and everything becomes an open playing field, and that is what some people were experiencing. I don't think Seiko is going to volunteer to produce watches at a lower price because many of the watches that people are thinking of when they're talking about these price ranges were never designed to be listed at those prices to begin with. It was just a byproduct of all these things that I'm describing. Also, nowadays, when you're looking at a watch in $150 range, I mean, even looking at a base Miyota 8 series caliber, looking at it where if you buy, say, like 50 just in bulk, I mean, you're talking about, say, $30 to $40 based on some quick checks that I was looking at online. And that's just the movement. Then you have to deal with the case, the dial, the hands, gaskets, and then the actual assembly cost. And with that, I mean, talking about $150, there's not much margin there when you're dealing with a manufacturer that's going this direction of vast distribution. I suppose if you were going to cut all costs, had very limited overhead, you maybe could pull it off. But think about the brands that are offering up watches in this price range. They're either very low cost assembly, usually not mechanical, and if they are, they're using cheap labor, probably overseas, where they can get that produced and made. So people potentially not even making a living wage making some of these watches. So that is sometimes the challenge with all of this when you're dealing with these price ranges and really tight margin with a product that is a watch that is very complicated to make. Even for some of the most basic three-hand movements out there, you're talking about over 100 components, and that is a lot to deal with and manufacture that costs money, and to assemble that, have some quality control that's any good, that also costs money too, and a skilled person that's going to do it. Next question asks, does engraving the back totally ruin the value of a watch? Answer, yes and no. I'll just speak to my own personal feelings. I don't think I would be as attracted to a watch for my own personal collection if it had a personal message to a former buyer. That said, there are some exceptions that you'll see in the vintage world where you're looking for provenance and have an understanding of where the watch ownership kind of comes from, who owned the watch in the past, what is the backstory. I mean, a famous example of this where it actually helped out is with Paul Newman's Daytona that sold at Phillips Auction in 2017. And that became a concept that added value to the watch, and it was a cool little tie-in. It also authenticated the watch and made it that much more real and allowed the watch to set records in the world of auctions at the time, and I think set forward in motion maybe the blitz that we're still now experiencing with some of these watches and their hype. But what I would say in concluding this is, if you are engraving a watch, the question shouldn't be about what is the value of this watch. If you're going to engrave a watch, the reason why you're doing it is because it's a sentimental piece. The value of it doesn't matter. The value is beyond the price tag. So I wouldn't even ask this question. If you're engraving a watch, it should be a keeper. It should be a watch that maybe you're gifting to somebody. I think that is what matters when you're engraving. If you're not going to do that, if you're not sold on a watch, don't get it engraved. And if you do get it engraved, I think you should have a connection to it and it should mean something to you. Next question comes from Facebook. Tyler asks, did Sinn lose its value proposition? I'm a huge fan of Sinn. Absolutely adore Sinn. Have owned several of their pieces, still own a Sinn 556, and I wear it. I was wearing it actually yesterday just because I'm like, hey, it's been a while. I want to wear one of these. This is a great watch. This is no nonsense. I don't think they've lost their value. I think they're still a phenomenal brand, but maybe they're not perhaps the steals that they once were in the past. But no question, a hell of a watch for the money. Some of their entry-level options, if you're looking at, say, like the 556 or the 104, you used to be able to get a 104 around $1,400 to $1,500. 556, say 5 or 6 years ago, right around $1,000 on a H-link bracelet. Those watches now, looking at the prices, you're talking about where I'm from in the US market in 2023, 556i on a bracelet, $1,590, and then the Sinn 104 on an H-link, about $1,900, $1,900. So are they as much of a steal as they were in the past? I would say no, but are they still phenomenal watches for the money, and would I recommend them? Absolutely. I think they're still among the best in class. They just were for many years perhaps underpriced and were some of the best steals in all of watchmaking. We are talking about the QC is always there, unique design, cool brand, German made, and always usually the fine tune and regulation for their movements are using higher grade movements on the inside. There's a lot to like with Sinn, and I still think to this day, good value for money, just not maybe where it was the steal, years ago. This last question asks, is it better to send older timepieces back to their manufacturer for service, regardless of cost, or would you go the direction of a trusted and reputable watchmaker? Now, first, you kind of insinuate trying to, regardless of the cost, if cost is the issue and it's a watch that you deeply value, it's not worth cutting costs anyway. If you want to go to the person that's going to do the best job, not who's offering the cheapest price, that you are not price shopping when you're dealing with, say, an heirloom piece or something of that sort. This does also strongly depend on the watch. It will depend also on your goal for the watch. How you would treat an heirloom piece versus a product that you're looking to freshen up. Maybe you're somebody who doesn't really care about polishing up the case and don't want to have scratches on it. I mean, there are a lot of people that are like that and they don't care about having the original case and having shines of wear. Or if you're somebody that's going to sell the watch in the near future, all of those different scenarios are going to maybe change the way that you're going to answer this question. If it is a small job that needs to be done, that really opens up your options, and I don't think you're necessarily going to have any maybe wrong direction. I would go to a trusted place, as always. If it is going to come from an authorized place that has a point of service, that would be a good thing to do. I would try to keep it local if you do have someone local, if possible. Most people that might not be possible because there are watch enthusiasts all around the world and they're not in major metropolitan areas. But as you add more work to the project and the older the watch is, that's where things can start to get a bit more complicated, because that's when parts ultimately are going to be a determining factor. Certain brands have made it increasingly difficult for independent watchmakers to work on pieces, not making those parts available. I mean, some have gotten savvy, but when speaking to them, this has been a major point of consensus. Rolex, for example, is pretty notorious for working around this, and then also when you send the watches back to them, are notorious for over polishing and trying to overly modernize a vintage watch, despite being instructed otherwise. So sometimes you just have to be really careful. I would say for a watch that is not going to be like an heirloom piece, you're not necessarily as worried about like the value retention, or you're trying to flip it here in the near future. You just want to, simply get some work done. I don't think it matters as much. You just want to go to a place that you trust, have a point of contact there that you can feel good about. And I would say for a lot of brands, it's okay to send it back to them. Some brands are better than others in terms of the restoration departments as well. Like if you can actually look into, their policies on restoration. Like I know for a fact, like when I went to Longines, they have 12 watchmakers on staff in their restoration department, and they have old parts that they made back in the day still available. JLC, I've been to the restoration department. Vacheron, I know, does quite a good job. I believe Patek, they're servicing pretty much any watch that was made in their creation since like the 1800s, or at least they have a long line of accepting watches back that they would be able to service, and they have all those machines. So it really just depends on the manufacturer. If you are trying to go outside of that and you're really concerned about maybe the brand not following your instruction, maybe you had like a call about it, you didn't like maybe the price, or you don't like the direction that they're taking it, and that you feel kind of pressured in a certain way that they're going to do something that you do not want them to do, then I would maybe look at some smaller independent watchmakers that have a good line of work, that have worked on watches of the same ilk. For Rolexes and things of that sort, you can look at like LA Watchworks. I know they're out on the West Coast. I've heard really good things. I've not actually done any work with them, but I've heard good things from a lot of collectors. Grand Central Watch, I've heard some good things from them in New York City. RGM, I know Roland there. They are very much backed up in terms of their restoration, but I know that he does a phenomenal job and does things the right way. Ultimately, this is a pretty case-by-case basis, but don't rush a service if it's something that's very loved by you and it's, say a family heirloom. Find the right person for the job. Let somebody that understands and can talk to you if you can talk to them, and if they are local, that's wonderful. And then just talk about some of the challenges. Have the right questions for them that might come up, and address your concerns on the upfront, so you don't have a situation where you get something back and damage has already been done. But all right, guys, that's another Q&A in the books. If you enjoyed the video and you like these style of videos, please give it a thumbs up. That's a great indicator for me that you'd like me to continue doing these videos in the future. If you want to stay in the loop for future Q&A videos, definitely follow on Instagram as well as Facebook and Twitter. Also check out TeddyBaldassarre.com, full authorized dealer of 30 brands, quick and fast fulfillment, dedicated customer support, and a full factory warranty for all the products that we offer. How we're able to fund all the productions on this channel. We don't charge the brands to produce any of the videos here. How we're able to do it is through selling watches on our site. We're completely self-funded. So if you are in the market for a watch, we'd love to have your business, and we know you can buy a watch pretty much anywhere nowadays, but that allows us to keep doing what we're doing here, and we love what we do. But guys, thank you again so much for watching. Be well, and I will see you all very soon.